So we hear so much about the business of bliss and monetizing your passion, but at the same time, a job is a job.
Yeah.
And at some point, everything sort of becomes routine. And I heard a great interview with Kurt Cobain one time, and he said he wished he could be in a band for 2 years, and then right as it was about to take off, leave it. Because
Right.
the fun part was in the building it.
Right.
So what happens when we go through a creative burnout? When, yes, it's fun to create and all that, but it becomes a job. We now have people to answer to who are paying our mortgage or whatever. What happens to that creative burnout? Like, how do you renew? Is it time to go in a new direction?
Well, sometimes I really never counsel people to quit their jobs, especially in today's economy. So it's like, and I think there's a really rational model where people can have day jobs and night jobs, or a job where you're paying the rent and then you go home and you do other stuff. Or sometimes when I work with people who are screenwriters, they do one for them, one for me, one for them, one for me. And that way they keep their soul alive. So one big studio gig, one little movie that may never get made, but I really want to write. One big studio gig, one movie for me. And I think that's a kind of a fair and rational model. Because, you do learn things from being in that interaction with those bosses or those studios or those big media companies. I think it does up your game. I think it sharpens your skills. It teaches you skills that you may need just to get your movie made. It may teach you presentation skills. It might teach you how to get up in front of a boardroom of 50 people and not have them make snarky comments after 30 seconds. And that might be an amazing skill that you need to learn when you're pitching investors around the table at Sundance one morning. So I think that's good that you have to do that. In terms of creative burnout, what I see people do is reinvent themselves. I think that we always have to be in a state of reinvention, of seeing the world with fresh eyes and turning ourselves inside out to do that. And we have to be willing to unlearn and try new things. Look, most people in today's world are not going to have one career. I probably had 4 or 5 careers. Most people who are graduating from college now will probably have 8 or 9 careers in their work life, also because they will be working until they are probably 75 or 80. And when I say different careers, I don't mean just like a thing and they shift a little bit to the right or the left and they're just in this constant, clear track. What I mean is that they are going to have wholly different careers. So what are the skills that we need to be ready for this world? We need the skills of collaboration, communication, visual media skills, and these are transferable across all areas. People who are in technology, for example, who train in technology, from the point they start freshman year, the technology they learned in freshman year is obsolete by the time they graduate senior year, right? So learning, mastering a certain software has a diminishing value. Mastering how to master software has incredible value because that's the transferable skill.
Okay, well, on your website, theculturalweekly.com, you interviewed James Morrison, who I believe you describe as an actor, writer, director, musician, filmmaker, and yogi. And speaking about his documentary entitled Showing Up, which sounds fascinating, it's about the audition process, I think. He mentioned in your interview, treat everyone as a collaborator, not an adversary. No one is actually standing between you and what you want to achieve or accomplish unless you put them there. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The ones who matter want you to succeed. Now, I know this is his take, but can you expand on that? I find that interesting. The ones that matter want us to succeed.
They do. Here's the thing. The audience matters. You're doing your work for your audience. The audience wants you to succeed. The audience is praying for your success. Have you ever bought a movie ticket and as you buy it say, gee, I hope this movie sucks and I leave in 20 minutes because I can't stand it anymore? No, you buy this ticket hoping you're going to have a great experience. The audience really, really passionately wants you to succeed. If you've ever been in a live theater performance when something awful happened, a light fell, or a costume change didn't happen, or a set didn't turn around, and the show had to stop, and the actors are standing there. They just don't know what to do. It just stops, right? And then it gets going again. What happens? The audience applauds, right? That it gets going again. The audience is there. The audience is passionately, enthusiastically invested in your success. It's the audience who matters. And so I agree with James. The audience passionately wants you to succeed. They're invested in your success. They root for your success. And, you know, the gatekeepers want you to succeed too. Because, now the gatekeepers may have a different value system than you do, but in the gatekeeper's value system, your success, which means their dollars, totally about their dollars. They're very happy for you to succeed that way.
Another article you've written for your site, theculturalweekly.com, is 3 reasons entrepreneurs and artists are the same. And you say, 1, they see past the horizon. 2, they are makers and doers, not daydreamers. And 3, they may finish, but they are never truly done. I'm curious though, how do some people get caught in that daydreaming trap? Are some people just born doers, and then some people are just born dreamers? Or is it a learned inertia?
Wow, do you know?
I'm asking for me. I vacillate between the two. So.
But you do get things done, don't you?
I do.
I mean, here you do. You're going to finish this video, so we know that you get things done. You know, the dream space is really necessary to create things at the end of the day. You have to have the dream time. And, you know, we probably both know many people, writers, for example, who won't write, and then in a weekend write a novel. And it just comes out. You know, Arthur Miller said, I wrote Death of a Salesman in 3 days. Well, of course, he may have physically sat at his old Remington for 3 days typing it, but he probably worked on it consciously, dreaming subconsciously for years before he finally got it onto the page. So that dreaming time is very important, but some people just dream. And we all know people who just say, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and they start a lot of things and they never finish them. They never get them, you know, really to a point of completion. That's not the people that we're talking to right now. We're talking to the people who actually get things done, who actually make things. Probably only 10% of the population, because the rest of the population are probably the constituents, the audience, the market for the people who actually finish things, get things done in this creative space. And of course, there's no value judgment about whether you finish or don't finish, whether you dream or make. Right? We all need each other. Introverts need extroverts, extroverts need introverts. Creative people need audiences, audiences need creative people. Cultural Weekly is all about a place where everybody can come and share that. And really what I'm trying to do on that side, with a lot of amazing help from some great writers and great thinkers and really, really loyal readers, we're just trying to elevate the conversation, because there's not a lot of great space to talk about creative things, and to talk about them in deep ways that are better than sound bites, that are deeper than thumbs up, thumbs down. And we're just trying to model ways to have conversations that have some depth and variety and other levels of interest and other ways to look at things. We don't have an axe to grind. We don't have a political perspective. We don't have a cultural axe to grind or a creative perspective, other than to value creativity, to say culture is really important, to say that the cultural and creative life that we live dramatically affects the world that we live in. And we should talk about that. We should have a place and a way to talk about that. It's all that we're trying to do on Cultural Weekly.
And if someone would like to contribute an article,
yes,
what would be the necessary steps, and what types of articles are you looking for? Sure.
Well, you go to culturalweekly.com, and under About, there's a category called Write For Us, and I have a list of guidelines for people to write. And we do get unsolicited contributions, and we read every one of them. And often they get into the online magazine, which we publish every week. It has to be about culture and creativity. So as long as you are looking at your subject through the lens of culture and creativity, or it's about something cultural or creative, it doesn't matter if it's present or past or future, it doesn't matter if it's architecture or painting or film or theater or dance. As long as it's about the creative work, it can find a home in Cultural Weekly. And then I care that you have a strong point of view and you articulate it well and that it's fascinating. Because in the online environment, you have to keep people's interest, and it's got to be fascinating, and you've got to have a good lead, and you need a good image so people will actually read it. It's all the same things as in a print magazine. It has all the same rules, and audiences will either turn the page or scroll away quickly unless you keep their interest.
And are many of your readers artists themselves, or they just appreciate nice things? Beauty?
I haven't done a survey, but I would say it's probably 80-20. I'd say probably 20% are creative people themselves, writers, playwrights, filmmakers, dancers, visual artists, poets. We actually have a lot of poets. We have a lot of poets. I think the article with the most comments is a poem, which is a beautiful and hopeful thing in America today. Something close to 200 comments on a poem. And probably the other 80% are just people who love creative things and read books and read poems and go to movies and go to theater and go to dance and care about architecture and care about art.
And what was your reason for starting the site?
It didn't exist. There's just a void. It didn't exist. I mean, the shocking thing is that that domain name existed, which was proof that it really didn't exist. Money and work are real issues. We all struggle with them. And the reason we all struggle with them is because everybody's really struggling with them. Our country is struggling with them. Every business struggles with them. Look, if you've worked in any company, in any corporation, and you look at their purpose statement or their mission statement, right? Their purpose statement, their mission statement is full of great idealistic language. It's all about the greater good. But what happens at the end of the quarter? The CFO comes in and says, where are the numbers? And at that point, the great purpose statements go out the window. We struggle with the issue of money and value and money and work because it's just a common issue for all of us. But your question is really, goes beyond that a little bit, which is, since so many people are struggling, how do you sort of square that? And I think it's really difficult. I think everybody tries to find that solution for themselves. I think we try to do the work that we like to do the most in the way that we can. And we hope that at a certain point, the work that we really love will overtake the work that we only like. And sometimes you have good choices and better choices, and you move to the better choice. And sometimes you have bad choices and worse choices. And then you can only take the bad choice because it's better than the worst choice. So it's really an individual solution that everybody has to find. There's no one common answer for that.
Of the creative individuals whom you know, whose sole source of income is from their creativity, what are they doing differently from those who are also talented but earn only a fraction of their income this way, or possibly just give away a lot of stuff for free? What's that determining factor that makes someone able to monetize their passion or the business of bliss versus someone who just does it and sort of gives it away?
Right, well look, I think there's three things. The first is one that's really unquantifiable. That's luck. It's the luck of the draw. It's being in the right place at the right time, hitting the mark, having the talent that's really going to jibe with a market or an audience need at a certain point. A lot of that is kind of outside of our control. So let's talk about the two things that are within our control. One is that the people who really monetize their talent do this thing that a lot of artists are uncomfortable with. They say, I'm worth something. They don't give it away. I think that artists are so used to giving things away for free that artists devalue themselves and devalue their work by doing that. So I think that artists kind of have to draw a line. You know, there's a petition going around now about the London Olympics because the London Olympics Committee is asking musicians to come and play in London for free. So what does that say when musicians go ahead and do that instead of saying, no, we're artists, we have to put food on the table, we have to pay the rent. So part of it is that. I think artists who really are able to continually monetize their work, just draw the line, do that uncomfortable thing and say, my work has value, you have to pay me for it. They've gotten over the difficulty of asking for money, which I know is difficult. They've gotten over the difficulty of selling, which I prefer to think of as offering, but they do sell. They put their work out there. You know, you can't really make money unless you offer something for sale. I know that that sounds kind of, you know, like boneheaded and obvious, but it's really true. And a lot of the times that people who are creative don't just stop and think, wow, I have to offer something for sale to give somebody the opportunity to give me money. So that's one. The second is that they are really outward focused. They really think about who's the audience, who's the constituency that they are trying to reach and serve, and it really comes from a place of service. And they have the ability to be hard-headed or hard-minded in their business perception and not make decisions that are solely based on their heart or their hope, but based on really looking at the marketplace, looking at the audience, looking at their constituents, looking at the facts, looking at the numbers, and saying, you know what? There's not really a big market for this thing over here. I might like to paint paintings that are 12 feet by 14 feet, but nobody can put it on their wall. And instead, we have to make things that people can put on their wall. You know, one of my good friends is a professional artist. She shows in galleries. She makes a living being an artist. And she was recently telling me that she's discovered that her clients are more interested in quality over quantity. And she's really decided in her next show, which is up now, she's doing fewer paintings that are better. She's looked at the sizes people buy, and she's made them to that size so she knows that they fit on the walls. And she's really customized her work to her constituents, to her audience, to her collectors. Now, does that mean that she's compromised? I don't think so. I think that she feels really happy that she's able to share her work, and she's able to get it into other people's homes so they're able to enjoy it. But it does mean that she has adjusted, tweaked her work, as it were, for her constituents.
Going back to putting a price on your art, I think a lot of artists, filmmakers, whatever, have this idea that money is sort of the root of all evil, and that there's a humility in being poor or not asking for a lot of money. Yeah. How do we get over that? Or is that something that takes a lot of soul searching? There's no one path for that? I mean, I think that's sometimes that stops a lot of people from monetizing. They think that it's humble and it's good to be sort of modest.
Yeah, you know, that's so true. So many of us have such this big problem with money, right? That we're afraid to accept it and we're afraid to ask for it. I don't know. I'm not a therapist. I can't dive down into what that's about. I think that a lot of it does come from people's upbringing and what was put on people when they were kids and what their parents gave them. But look, money is neither evil nor good. Money is money. Money is a means to an end. Money is a means to pay the rent and do your car payments and have dinner tonight. And it's just really awful and wrong that people who are values driven and creatively driven don't feel that they have enough self-worth to ask for the money for their work. I would love to change that. If there's one thing that I could change with a wave of my hand, if I had the magic power, that's what I would change. And I would totally invert the way people are paid and the way people ask for money. In my ideal society, creative people and teachers would be the highest paid people, and then everybody else would be somewhere below that.
Writer Tim Ferriss talked about how eventually the mainstream media could not ignore him anymore with the 4-hour work week and 4-hour body, all of that. So he had broken free of sort of this obscurity. But many of the people that we know have not. They have very talented, beautiful work, but they're battling against people who have crossed over that threshold. So how do you compete with the Spider-Mans, the Avengers, when you're still in that obscure level and you have a beautiful indie film that's character-driven but no names, stolen shots? How do you battle against that obscurity and break free, or is it a numbers game, time?
Right. Well, how do you do it? You have to be loud. You have to be really, really loud. You have to do something that's unexpected that the other people won't do. You have to do something to get noticed. The 4-hour work week, I can't talk, is a brilliant title. That's a title that begins to get loud and get some attention. By the way, I think one of the worst things about most indie movies is their titles suck. Their titles do not declare what they are and make you want to go see them. And if we could have really good indie movie titles, I think we would start to begin to break through that a little bit. So you've got to do something loud, outrageous, unexpected, which means conceptual. It doesn't mean expensive. Loud is not expensive. Loud is just loud. Loud is just something that gets noticed. So you have to do something that gets noticed, and I don't know what that is. It really depends on every single project, and every project has its own unique thing that it needs to do to get noticed. And sometimes it has nothing at all to do with the project itself. It's just something that sits beside the project. Horror movies often do this with really loud and outrageous and graphically violent one-sheets, which is kind of a lower chakra example, but it's an example that you instantly recognize, and there is a certain core audience that if it's gory enough, they will go to it. So if you can loudly say, this is the goriest movie out this month, the Gorefest people will come and see that, right? So I don't think that's only relevant for horror movies. I think that's also relevant for movies for romantic comedies, for movies for senior citizens, it's like for movies for various specific communities. Now the other thing is you have to think about what does breaking through and having success mean? I don't think it means being on 5,500 screens. I think that success could be being on 100 screens. And for a really great independent movie, being on 100 to 500 screens, I think is massive breakthrough, breakout success, and you totally get noticed. So part of it is lowering the ceiling a little bit on what your expectations are to the realities of today's marketplace. And in my experience of talking to exhibitors, they are really hungry to have good independent movies. You know, all the big exhibition chains now actually have marketing departments that are solely directed to helping independent movies find their audiences. AMC, Pacific, Krikorian, Regal, they all have SWAT teams that are just for marketing movies. Now, this is not marketing from the distributors. This is marketing on the theater exhibitor side, trying to get butts in those seats, because exhibitors have a huge problem. The problem is that most of the time, there are not people in their seats. Exhibitors experience on an annual basis 85% of their seats going empty. I see you raising your eyes, like it's a shocking number, right? You say, like, in theaters, only 15% of the seats are full on an annual basis. Yeah, that's right. They have 85% of the seats to fill. So if you, as an independent filmmaker, come up with a really innovative way to say, hey, I can help you fill your seats on Monday and Tuesday nights, or Wednesday afternoons, which is when it's empty, right? How many times have you gone to a matinee on a Wednesday at 1 o'clock and you're the only person in the theater? If you could help fill those seats, exhibitors would come running to you because they really want to sell their popcorn and they really love movies.
Adam, you've written some articles about the state of the film industry, especially for indie films. Can you tell us what this means for filmmakers and how are things changing?
Yeah, well, it means something that filmmakers know already. It's really tough out there. It's so hard. And the difficulty is part of the frustration, because I don't think there's ever been a time when there has been such an imbalance between so much good quality work over here, not only in narrative movies, but especially in documentary movies. I think documentary movies now often blow narrative movies away. Such an imbalance of amazing quality work over here, and this tiny little pinhole through which these movies are trying to get to find their audience. It's just crazy. I also don't know any other market, any other pursuit where there's so much amazing product, if you will, over here, and so little ability for customers to come and get it over here. And that's the state of the affairs that we're in right now. So what do we see happening? What do we see changing? I think a lot of the things that you've alluded to. There are increasing distribution channels that are out there for independent filmmakers, which are not all theatrical, a lot of which are online. It's never been easier to get people to see your movie than today. It's never been harder to get people to pay to see your movie than today. And we still don't have those models working yet. I think it's going to be another couple of years before we start to see some models that really allow filmmakers to begin to monetize their work better. The other thing is what I spoke about before. I think that lowering your ceiling for success and really understanding rationally that if you can get into theaters, being in 500 or 100 screens is really great success, and feel terrific about that, because that is huge success. I think that's breakthrough success, and that is success that will get noticed by larger and larger players in the movie game.
Do you think the theater-going experience is going away? Do you think that as gas increases and the cost to find a babysitter and all of that goes along with going out to the movies goes up, that we'll just resort to just these home theaters and that'll be our world, and that's
well, look, the statistics tell us that attendance has been going down steeply every year since the end of the Second World War. It's a movie, not movie box office. Movie box office is going up because it now could cost $17 to go to the Grove on a Saturday night for a 3D movie, which is shocking. So they're increasing the ticket prices, but the attendance is going like this. So I hate to say that, but I don't see that trend changing. I just see attendance continuing its downward trend. I don't think it's ever going to flatline, but it's going to keep going down.
Should filmmakers self-distribute their own work?
Yeah, sure. Unless someone else is going to distribute it for you. But look, the number of distributors has shrunk so much. And the number of movies that studios release has gone from about 200 5 years ago to about 135 last year. So if you want your movie to have theatrical distribution, you have to explore all of your options, but yeah, you should really explore self-distribution. Now, what I mean by self-distribution may be a little bit different from what you may think of about self-distribution, because I think there's a real value in having distribution professionals at your side as you try to distribute your movie. So generally what I counsel filmmakers to do, if they're making a movie that might have a budget of at least $500,000 to $1 million, is build some money into their fundraise for distribution at the beginning. Don't try to raise that money at the end. Build it in at the beginning so you can make the case to your investors who are going to say, but are you sure the movie's even going to get seen? 5,000 movies a year in America don't even get seen. Maybe it's 10,000 movies. And you can say to the distributor, yes, I can guarantee you this movie's going to get out there and you're going to get distribution in at least 12 markets because we've built the money into the budget. And you probably want to build between, depending on the size of the movie and the number of markets that you want to be in, between $100,000 and $300,000 into your budget. So you can sort of see that maybe this takes your budget from $1 million to $1.3 million, but it's not like it takes your budget from $1 million to $5 million. It just adds something incremental. But it is a great insurance policy for your investors that the movie's actually going to get out into the marketplace, which means that people can see it theatrically. It's going to get reviews. You're going to get publicity. People will have you on their radio shows and on their podcasts, and you can get it out there a little bit. And then what you can do is retain on contract distribution professionals who will help you market and book your movie in theaters. And there's a number of really good ones. If any of your constituents want to get some recommendations, they can come and find me, and I'd be happy to pass that along. And I think that's a really good way to do it. Now, of course, a lot of people don't have that budget. They're making movies that are at the $20,000 level, and then you really do have to do it yourself. And then that's just the experience of booking the theaters yourself and going there and getting people to do it, getting people to show up. And that's a lot of work. But if you're going to make a $20,000 movie, that is kind of the ticket that you've chosen to ride. So that's the game you've chosen to play.
How does an artist do their, quote, due diligence on their audience? What are some of the things they can do to research who that niche is that they're selling to?
Well, there's so many free resources out there right now. If you're, I know a lot of your audience are filmmakers, right? So the first thing that your filmmakers should do is you should go to thenumbers.com, which is the-numbers.com, and go to Box Office Guru and Box Office Mojo, and find movies that are just like yours that were made in the past 5 years. And I call these comps. This is what you do when you're a buyer. You know, I've been on the distribution side and the buyer side and the studio side a lot. So whenever we evaluate a movie, that we evaluate it by looking at comparatives or comps. And your filmmakers should do exactly the same thing. That's exactly what independent filmmakers should do. Independent filmmakers have to start thinking like buyers or distributors, because ultimately that's how they're going to get their work out there. So what you want to do is you want to find comps. And a comp is a movie that is made in the past 5 years. Older than 5 years ago, it doesn't matter. That market is a generation old. It has to be the same genre. It has to be the same rating, the same language, the same budget, the same level of star talent. So, for example, if we have a romantic comedy with like you and me starring, and try to compare it to a movie with Kate Hudson and Ben Stiller, it's not a comp, because they're movie stars, and you should be a movie star, but we're not movie stars. But if you're going to have a romantic comedy and you can compare it to another romantic comedy that might be made for $100,000 without named stars, with great actors, but without named stars, then you're beginning to find some comps. And I always counsel filmmakers, you've got to find at least 5 comps, true comps, honest comps. Don't kid yourself. Be brutally honest with yourself. 5 comps in the past 5 years. If you can't find 5 comps in the past 5 years, you probably are going to find it very difficult to get distribution for your movie. If you can find 5 in the past 5 years that have gone out into the marketplace, that have found an audience, that have made a little bit of money, you actually stand a pretty good chance of being able to get your movie distributed somehow. So a lot of people say, well, how do I find comps? It's so hard to know. How do I find like romantic comedies or whatever it is that you're trying to find, or action thrillers without big name cast, or whatever it is you're trying to do? And one of the things that is great and free is Amazon. You go to Amazon.com and you put in a movie that's like yours. So let's say you found one movie that was like yours, but you don't know what the other ones are. Put that in, say you want to buy it. And then scroll down, and down at the bottom it says, customers who bought this movie also bought that movie. And you're going to see, going along the bottom of the page, all these other possible movies. And a good number of those are probably comps for you. So that's one sort of easy, quick, and dirty way to begin to develop a database of comparative titles for what you're trying to do.
How much of an artist's work boils down to just plain marketing? That's a good question. How much? Really hard to say a percentage. And I think that what we've seen is that some more than others. And sometimes artists are criticized within the artist community for marketing too much, which is another issue that we have to get over. That the social proof for creative people is not at the same level as the social proof of bankers, right? If bankers have a good year, and we know this from Wall Street, I've gone out to dinner with them where they order $500 bottles of something and pass them around. Their social proof, they clap each other on the back, and they're really happy that they had $1 million year or $1 million month. In the creative community, if someone has $1 million month, other creative people feel envious, jealous, angry, say maybe, you're not really the artist that you once were. So we kind of have to get around that. And so the line between selling and marketing and success and marketing is a blurry and difficult line. But I would rather recast your question, if I may. I think that a lot of an artist's success, maybe 90% of an artist's success, is offering the work. So if we don't think about it as marketing, we think about it as offering, I think a lot of the financial success or public awareness success is in being able to offer the work and just say, hey, I made this thing. I think it's really beautiful. I think you will too. Here it is. And if artists can't offer their work, they can't really receive anything back for it. Part of what goes with offering also is the ability to know who you're offering to. So one of the things that I like to train people in is knowing who your audience is. And you can't reach everybody. We don't have a $150 or $200 million studio marketing budget to blanket the airwaves and the cable stations and the YouTube channels and every other place, so we get like lots of paid commercials. We can't afford paid commercials, right? We have to get our word out through word of mouth or a very, very minimal marketing budget. So we have to be super targeted
We have to be hyper-targeted. We have to be like snipers, knowing exactly who our audience is. And so knowing who your audience is, who you're making your work for, is one of the keys to successfully offering the work to those people.
What's the biggest hindrance to a creative person? And then on the positive side, what's a creative person's biggest asset?
Same thing. Self-confidence.
How does someone get that?
That's a short answer for you.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful answer. How
Right.
does someone get that if it's not natural? It's not instilled in them for whatever reason.
And we know that it's not instilled in many of us. Many of us are deeply insecure. Many of us are naturally introverts, like myself. And it's really difficult I had to train myself to get up and talk in front of a room of people and find my voice and be able to have the words still come out of my mouth and anything that is halfway decent. I think the way you do it, I'll just tell you, for me, I think you act it. I think it's like a suit of clothes that you put on, and you grow accustomed to wearing the suit of clothes, and eventually you say, wow, really is my shirt. I can really wear the clothes. I think at some level that insecurity never goes away. You know, probably, I certainly know people who are highly respected, really gifted, famous, highly paid, creative people who are deeply, deeply insecure. So that there's some level at which that never vanishes. But being able to find the confidence to put yourself out there, to put your work out there, to believe in yourself, and to persist in it is something that I think people just do by doing. You kind of have to do it by doing. It's really like any other craft. You can read about making movies, but you don't learn how to make a movie until you pick up a camera and you shoot things, and then you get to the editing room and discover, oh, I didn't shoot the right things, and you have to go back the next day, and you discover all those things. You do it by doing it.
Well, in keeping with Insecurity, back in the 90s we had talk shows.
Mm-hmm.
People would stand up in front of Montel Williams or Jerry Springer, and they would have the mob and the mass tear them down.
Yeah.
And now we have internet commenting, discuss, whatever, Yahoo,
Right.
So how does someone not let that affect them? Let's suppose they've reached a certain level where there are now people commenting on what they do, whether it's an article, whether it's a video, whatever, and it's negative. Do they just turn it off and simply don't look at it? Do they look at it and say, well, this is how I'm perceived, so maybe I should take it with a grain of salt?
I mean, look, I come out of theater, and most actors I know, and when we're working plays, we just said to the cast, don't read the reviews. Because you have to go on tonight. And it's actually different and harder for actors, right? Because they're there in front of the live audience. Stage actors. They're there in front of the live audience every night. And this morning, the New York Times came out with a review that said that they were awful. And they have to go on tonight, knowing that everybody in the audience may have read the review. And you just can't read the reviews. You have to believe in your work. Now, I'm not saying don't listen to the audience. The audience has a lot to tell us. The audience makes us make our work better. The audience refines the work. I'm a great believer in previewing your movies and sitting there in the audience and watching and seeing if they get up and go to the bathroom, or if they laugh at the jokes, or if they cry when you want them to cry. And if they don't, the audience has told you something without ever filling out a card or making a comment, because you didn't deliver what you wanted to convey to them. And then you can go back and you can recut and reshoot and do whatever you need to do. So I'm not saying don't listen to the audience, but I am saying that you've got to do what you believe in. And as a very famous director once told me, the audience is always right, except when they're wrong.
Adam, you want to see more people whose primary source of income is from their creative output. Why is this important to you?
Well, I think it's not just important to me, I think it's important to everybody. It's especially important to the people who are creative, because it's so frustrating to be creative, to make something that's kind of wonderful and precious and want to share it, and then not really have any mechanism to share it, and not be able to sustain yourself and your family by sharing your work. Now, look, I don't think all the time that people create things, they're fabulous or they're great. In fact, most of the time we know that they're not. We know that they need a lot of refinement and working before they are terrific and really hit their mark for their audience or their constituents. But the other thing that we do know is that a lot of great creative work just doesn't get out there. It just doesn't get seen. And until we get to a place in this country where it gets out there and gets seen, we're not taking advantage of this amazing resource that we have as Americans. You know, we used to call it Yankee ingenuity or American ingenuity. And if you look at where we are in this country right now, I think that we're really in a trough. You can't look at our country now and say things are going great. You can't look at our country and say that things are not broken, because they are. We're all struggling. Everybody's struggling. Artists are struggling. Creative people are struggling. Our economy is struggling. Our innovators are struggling. Why? Because so many things have been outsourced. Right now, you know, today, Obama and Romney are having dueling sound bites about who is the greater outsourcer. One's calling the great outsourcing CEO, and Romney's calling Obama the outsourcer in chief. But the real issue is, why are all these things being outsourced, and what can we keep at home? What we can keep at home is creativity and innovation. Creativity cannot be outsourced. Innovation cannot be outsourced. That's why it's so important. It's really important to all of us to really maintain the country that we want to live in.
So you have a new venture. It's
right.
So sort of a consulting, or?
Well, it's sharing information. I've become so frustrated with so many terrific pieces of work and so many amazing creative people not being able to get their work out there. And I've identified the reason is it's just hard to know how you do it. It's hard to know what the pathway is. So in my work, I'll grant that you are creative and that you have something terrific to share. I'm not doing Artist Way workshops. I'm not doing things to help you motivate your creativity. What I am doing is helping you learn the path to get your work out there. And it's not as though the path to get your work out there is really held by secret cabals with special handshakes, but it's not really openly talked about. It's not really openly shared. There's no one central database that you can go to find out the information. It's kind of why you're doing what you're doing. You're trying to go out, interview people, get the information and get it out there so people can know about it. And I'm trying to do exactly the same thing. So I'm taking the information that I have learned from my years in theater, in film, as an executive, as a producer, as a distributor, and also all the amazing information that I've learned from the amazing people that I've been privileged to work with. And I have studied them, and I've studied what has made them successful, and I've studied what has worked, and I've studied what has not worked, and I've done things that have worked, and I've done things that have not worked. And I've tried to put it together in a way that's just really digestible, understandable, repeatable. And this is the thing, it's repeatable. I think if you know that there are steps, you will always get to a result. The result may not be the result you hope for. It may not be $100 million in the Academy Award, but you will get a result. And the result will inform what you do next. It will help you inform your work. It will help you make your work better. Maybe the work that you're working on right now, and maybe your next work. So that's really what I'm doing now.